Welcome to Solutions with Courtney Anderson. I am your host, Courtney Anderson, and thank you for taking time out of your life to join me and be part of the program today. I would like to encourage you, as often I will mention in the programs, come by CourtneyAnderson.com. We are always launching new content and new ways to try to be of service to help everyone in the community meet and surpass and sustain that state of contented satisfaction in terms of your goals. And so come on by, join in to our discussion and take advantage of all the different things that we're doing and share with us your feedback. What do you think? You have a show suggestion, topic? We look forward to hearing from you. So today we have a program that is one of the Joyful Art of Business series. And of course, the Joyful Art of Business is one of our fundamental principles of everything that we do in our programs, everything I do in my professional services. The idea here is that when we look at what we're doing, right, with our work, whether it's paid or volunteer, we want to ask ourselves, in terms of my outcome, right, in terms of what I got out of it, how do I feel? It's sort of my emotional and psychological well-being, because we really, really, really are going to try to avoid that. I was going to say depressing, and then I thought, it's not, well, but it actually is. When you have somebody who sort of you would think externally should have it all, right? Maybe a good job title, maybe a prestigious organization or entity, maybe high quality of health or prestige or academic accomplishment or financial accomplishment, and they possess those things and they're miserable. Because then you think, well, what was it all worth, right? At least when you have somebody who says, "Oh, I'm striving, I'm aiming for these goals, and I'm a little, frustrated." You can think, "Oh, okay, well, great." Well, when you get there, right, when you meet and surpass your goal, that should be sort of the promised land of an earthly sense. And to have somebody who has achieved and surpassed their goals and they're unhappy and they're miserable, they're self-destructive. It's disturbing. So what we're doing is saying in a Joyful Art of Business, first of all, that everything we do is work. We just call it business, and that it's an art. That there's an individual contribution that you make to whatever you're doing. That is, I'm labeling something that makes it uniquely yours and an artistic endeavor, and that it needs to be joyful. That you need to look and ask yourself, how do I feel about this? Again, trying to avoid that outcome where other people will perceive, well, you should be happy, you quote have it all, and you're miserable and self-destructive or hurt other people, and we just really want to avoid that. All of that is to say that our show today, I think, is a great example episode of the entire series, right? So we just are always asking ourselves, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? Do I want to keep doing it, right? That's part of the really simplified version of Joyful Art of Business. What is this? Why am I doing this? Do I want to keep doing this? And we want to keep sort of checking the temperature of how we feel, what our return on our time and our toil is. And so the show today, specifically our episode is, are you a prisoner of your own hope? Are you a prisoner of your own hope? And in parentheses, it says, are you unhappy and hoping for change? That's what the title means. Are you a prisoner of your own hope? And as we were putting the show notes together and preparing for the recording, even just the title of this, I think, is a really vivid way of expressing the things that we can do to be our own obstacle and the things that we can do to be our own jailer. And so let's start talking about it. So recently, I was doing some of my volunteer work as an attorney. So I was providing legal services to people in the local community at a local courthouse. People could just come in for free and ask questions of an attorney about a family law issue or something family law related. So divorce, child custody, guardianships, um, things of that nature. So I talked to so many people, and I've done volunteer work of this nature since probably somewhere around 1998, as my schedule permits in Texas and in the state of Nevada as a lawyer. So I'm doing my volunteer work, and the consistent thing that I've recognized over all these years, so these are somewhat different geographic regions in the U.S. In terms of their culture and the population demographics, and the years have gone by, right? So it's wow. The time of recording this is 2014, so that's quite a few years I've been doing this, about 16 years. So what's one of the things that I've noticed that's been consistent? It's someone who tells me a situation that's just, I think, something that we would all agree is either really awful and horrible or, pretty yucky. So it's a situation that's like not good, right? Let's say it's somebody who's dealing with a situation of maybe domestic violence, abuse. And I've had men and women of all different ages in situations where their lives are in danger. Okay. So that's something that we would pretty much in general agree is not good. Now the level of what people would say, how horrible it ranks on their personal scale of horribleness, would deviate a little bit. But in general, very few people would make the argument that's a great thing that an adult would be in fear of physical harm and potentially having their lives ended by another person that they are in a family relationship with. So, when you look at situations that we would pretty much, I think, generally label as bad, and you ask yourself, okay, what can we do to fix it? Now, part of that, of course, is and my own transparency and my own trying to know myself better and be more honest with my shortcomings. My personality type and the way that my framework of my brain tends to go is the first thing I'm going to think, of course, is how can I fix it? Now, in all fairness, when I'm an attorney, a volunteer, or working with clients that are part of my for-profit firm, that's my job. People don't come to lawyers to just sort of listen. I mean, that would be a different job. There are professions who that is their job, or it's more of the job. Maybe someone who's a counselor, although they often are not just to listen. They usually also have part of a solving or helping to come up with solutions. So here I am trying to be helpful, and somebody's describing something that's bad. It's not good. And the thing that amazes me that I've consistently heard in different areas from all different types of people is this idea of they're not going to take any action at all. None. But they're going to hope. And usually they'll say something along the lines of, yeah, okay, so I'll explain to them, because if you're going to take action and we're talking about legal issues, then there's almost always some sort of document you have to fill out so that you can get that legal issue recorded and start moving towards solutions. So whether it's somebody filing for a divorce or somebody asking for a restraining order for someone to stay away from them, a protective order, all of this requires documentation. You just don't. In many, I've never experienced where you can just sort of say something. You have to write it down so that you can then start a legal case and move forward. There needs to be a record of what you're asking. And so what'll happen often is I'll explain to people what the paperwork is. In many cases, we'll give them the paperwork. And here's the paperwork. Here's where you need to go to fill the paperwork out. I mean, here's where you need to go after you fill the paperwork out and turn it in. Here's what you need to do with paperwork. People who don't have the fees to pay for legal issues. Some of the issues don't have a cost to file. Some of them, to file the paperwork, it does cost something. But there's other paperwork that you can fill out and say, hey, I need this legal service, from the government, which is what the courts are. But I don't have any money. So you can fill out a piece of paperwork explaining that you don't have any money. They'll call them either a pauper's affidavit or something similar. It's a piece of paper saying, hey, I don't have any money, but I need this government service. And so you turn the paperwork in, or you turn the paperwork and the money in, and then there you go. You're off and running, right? You're to the races. Let's get this solved. But what I hear, and what's consistently been interesting, at least I guess from an academic perspective, is so many people who they have it in hand what they're supposed to do. And yet, they'll basically say, yeah, okay, all right, I understand. But then they go into some sort of discussion about an alternative plan, which is fine. We talk about all the time in all of our programs. You have a plan, your first plan or plan A. You have your second plan B, in case plan A doesn't work or, it's a disaster. Maybe you got a plan C, D, and E. Sometimes you have a whole plan through the whole alphabet and you just keep coming up with alternatives, right? We don't necessarily give up on our goals unless we, have some absolute, definitive reason why something won't be possible. Right? So what would that be? So someone, I know people, what do you mean? So let's say your goal is I really want a certain person, to hire me and work for them. I think they're the greatest person ever. I think this is the best organization, and you're really working on that, and you're working on it, and you're getting your resume and your skills together, and then that person or that passes away, or the business, goes out of business. Okay, well now it's impossible because it doesn't exist anymore in a form that you could go and be part of it in this life. Okay. That's what I meant by impossible. So there are times when you realize that specific goal, it's impossible for reasons I just explained. It doesn't exist or something of that nature. What is it that would keep somebody in a situation where they're unhappy or miserable, or their life is in danger, or they're in just intense physical anxiety or pain, or they're emotionally in pain? Why do they not take action and instead just return to an alternative plan, which I'm not saying that you shouldn't have. I mean, having a plan based on hope, that's not a plan that anyone I think would say is a negative necessarily, unless that's your only plan. One of the things in the show notes that I did for this show, as we often do, is we look to see, what's the definition again of hope? What does it mean? Because we want to be clear. Because maybe someone else is thinking, well, when I use the word hope, what I mean is, yeah, I'm going to take the paperwork, I'm going to get it done, I'm going to apply for that job, I'm going to make it happen, I'm going to go back and get my skills enhanced with a class. Maybe that's what somebody means. So I went to my dictionary, not mine, like I own it, but one I locate that appears to be a credible dictionary. And it says that a definition of hope, my dictionary link in the show notes provides, says hope, to want something to happen or be true. All right, now so far I'm with this, right? How many things do we all want to happen or be true? I mean, I want so many things, for good health, for the health of people and animals and other entities that I care about. We want something to happen or be true. So far this is awesome. So let's continue on. The definition says to want something to happen or be true and think that it could happen or be true. Well, so far, all right. So maybe I want to think to myself, okay, I'd like to run a 10-kilometer race. That sounds fine. And then I think it could happen. Okay, well, that's fine. I don't see a problem necessarily with this idea of hope. I'm not even sure why the show is on this sort of tangent about maybe potentially a bad or negative outcome. Remember, my argument is this. If hope is your only plan, that's where we can set up the conditions that may result in somebody being trapped or imprisoned by just this wish. Remember, a hope is where I'm wanting or something to happen or be true, which is fine and normal. We all have all types of wants. The idea is I also think it could be true. All right, well, that's fine. I think in my mind I want that and it could happen. Now we do lots of other programs and I talk a bit about trying to think through what's the difference between something that could happen, which is it's possible, which is almost everything. Now I just gave an example earlier where sometimes things do become impossible, right? You wanted to work at that business, now that business went out of existence. Okay, well now that's not going to happen in the form that I wanted it. But there are multiples of possibilities, right? Because it's possible somebody else could reopen that business, right? It's possible. The challenge is, and the frustration I think, and sometimes the pain that I was mentioning that I've seen certainly as a lawyer in my practice in volunteer work, and I've seen it in everything else I do, is where somebody has hope as their only plan. Because because hope itself is just sort of wanting and then thinking, it's wishing and then thinking, well, okay, I'm wishing it, but I also, I'm thinking it could happen. And my argument is, well, we could apply that framework to almost anything. Really, seriously. I mean, I could say to you right now, I hope to become a gold medal Olympic athlete. Now, some people would argue that, is that the most likely thing that's going to happen as you've never been a competitive athlete in any sport ever. And I have historically been rated very poorly for my athletic, skills. I run slow. I don't have good hand-eye coordination. I can't jump, and I was born sort of with my kneecaps placed not exactly where they're supposed to be. So that's part of my rationalization. But the other part of it is, the truth is, it's not something that I've pursued. And then of course I have some issues that have sort of not built my machine of my body for a lot of athletic endeavors. So it's possible that I could do it, though. It's possible. It's totally possible. I could find examples of people who, were not doing anything athletically, and then they had sort of a moment where they decided, I'm going to do it, and then boom, there they go. A couple years later, athletic excellence, Olympic medalist. It could happen, and they do have different Olympics for different types of people. So they have Olympics for people who have differently abled developmental and physical issues. So they have Special Olympics. Okay, they've got Senior Olympics, so that's something else. There's all kind of opportunity, right? Especially if I broaden my definition. So my point is that hope itself is fine. The challenge, though, between the hope and the reality is that part in the middle where I got up and started doing physical things. That's the part I need. If it's just me sitting on my couch and let's say I'm 200 pounds overweight and I'm in very poor health and I'm completely sedentary, then the odds of me becoming an Olympic medalist of any type for any Olympics at all, the Senior Olympics, the Special Olympics, any Olympics, the Paralympics, the odds of any type of activity if I'm doing literally nothing, but just sitting on a chair or a couch or a mattress or something, hundreds of pounds overweight, it's not happening because I'm not doing anything to potentially help that hope become a reality. And so and this is tough because so much of it is, it's a balancing act. A part of what we do in this business, and actually what I do in every business. So as a lawyer, as a business consultant and corporate educator, as an author and speaker, and as a professor, as a real estate investor, so much of what I do is trying to uplift people's ability to dream and imagination. That whole idea, come on, if you can dream it, you can do it. Think outside the box. You got to be a visionary. There's so much of that. It's trying to get people to hope, to get people to think it could happen, right? Because you're fighting against that totally different, obstacle where people will tell you, it's just, I can't do it. And instead of it being something that's seemingly a very small percentage of success, like going from zero athletic activity and maybe some severe sedentary issues to Olympic gold medal, that's a huge journey. People can and do it, but it's just less percentages of people are successful because it takes a lot of effort. But I'll talk to people all the time And I just gave the example at the beginning of the show. Well, I'm not asking you to, go and be a world-class Olympic athlete. What I'm asking you to do is fill out a document so that you can protect your life. When you're telling me you have a serious problem or your life is in danger, or maybe your children's life is in danger, maybe your elderly parents' life is in danger, and you're not doing anything. To me, filling out a piece of paper is not the same burden in terms of time and effort as trying to be an Olympic gold medalist. And even when the task is much less burdensome, people will still act and believe that they can't do it. And they'll tell me that I can't do this. I can't fill this out. I don't understand what it means. And then I'll say, well, is it a situation where you want the paperwork in a different language? Because in every place I've ever worked, there are multiple versions of the paperwork because we want everyone to be able to access the government services. That's the reason they're there. They're public services. So I'll say, do you need another language? Oh, no. This language is fine. This is the language. I read and understand the language. I just don't, it's a lot to fill out. And when people sort of throw up those, what I believe are imaginary obstacles, in my mind, I think, well, yes, it's something to fill out. I mean, if you don't write and document and tell people what's going on and who you are and who the other people are that are involved and where it's happening and when it happened and what you want, then how will anybody be able to help you? You have to express it. And so, to me, that's not the same as saying to somebody who's, 250 pounds overweight and has other, potentially medical conditions and is completely sedentary and saying, let's go win an Olympic gold medal. It's not the same level, but I get sometimes the feedback from people, and I work with people who I think in their minds it's the same, or it's even more difficult. I might as well have said to them, why don't you go build, a spaceship that will be able to transplant you, to planet Mars in 10 days. I mean, I think honestly that's the level of resistance that I encounter with people, and the challenge is trying to balance. Like I said, on one hand, you really do want to encourage people to think and dream and hope, because that's the only way you get the idea, right? I can fill the paperwork out. I can apply for that program or that job. I can get a safer apartment in a better area for my children to play outside. I can, make different choices with my nutrition to impact in a positive way my health. I mean, you're trying to get people to perceive it. So on one hand, like I said, this is tough because you're it's sort of like, Sisyphus, right? Like you're pushing that boulder up that mountain. You're trying to get people to come on, dream, come on, you can do this, you can fill the paperwork out, you can eat differently, these things that seem externally like they're very, like the bar is low, like it's not that difficult, right? It's not that time consuming, or it's free or whatever. But the thing is, from inside the person's mind, it sounds as fantastical as, like I said, creating a spaceship from scratch. That's how silly it sounds to people who really honestly don't have a role model for it, have never seen anybody else do it, don't have any personal experience with that type of success. So part of what you're trying to do is get people to hope, right? Because without the hope, then you have nothing. I mean, you have the hope. Ideally, you want the hope because you need the vision, right? That's the vision. And then you add the action, the steps you're going to take, and then you achieve what I always talk about, surpassing that goal. But you need the combination. Without any hope, nothing happens, because then I get people who tell me they can't even imagine it's possible to fill out the paperwork or eat differently or make different choices. So we have just complete inertia and not even the potential. So the hope is important. The challenge is, though, like with everything, or almost everything, we don't like absolutes, but with almost everything, all things in moderation. So you must have the hope, because the hope is what allows you to perceive the possibility. And without that, of course, you have nothing, because then you just have that people caught in that endless loop of, well, I can't do that. That's impossible. And I honestly have seen so many examples where it doesn't even matter how seemingly minuscule or minor the issue is. If somebody believes they are not able and they are not capable, it's not happening. So we need the hope. We require hope. The challenge, though, is that, well, like we were talking about with moderation, we can't only have hope. Like, well, hope is step one, right? I'm hoping, I'm thinking, and the great thing about the hope is, and it's free. It's just you in your own mind sitting around hoping and thinking, right? I want it to happen or be true, and I think it could. All of that's free. But it's powerful. It's incredibly powerful. And so I must have hope because that's the first part of anything that's going to happen in real life that you're going to meet and surpass a goal. I have to have it. Now, some people will say, well, I didn't have any hope of myself, but my family member or my mentor or a great teacher or a motivational speaker or an author or someone in the public that I read about, they are the ones that inspired me and they gave me the hope. Not exactly. What it was they're the ones that maybe were a conduit, but you had to be open to the idea. You could have the greatest family member, teacher, expert, um, professor, motivational speaker in the universe, but that doesn't mean that the person's going to do anything without their own investment and belief in the possibility in themselves. And I've done a lot of different professional services, and I know, that's what frustrates and drives professionals often to their own negative feelings, is feeling like I can't save people, I can't reach everybody. Well, no, we can't. The person themselves has to pick up. They have to pick up their own burden of this and ask and believe themselves it's possible. Now they may believe it inspired by the teacher, the family member, the author, someone in the public that they admire, and that's great. But it wasn't entirely due to just that entity, because if that was true, then everybody that entity came in contact with would all have this sort of wonderful, hope-filled life, and life would be easy. All we'd have to do is just spread that one person's message. And it's not like that. Even in religions, many people believe in different religions, but not everybody believes in the same thing. So that tells us then that we have to have some of this, some percentage of this is the person, right? They have to believe. All right, so we have to have hope. So here I am in a show where I started off potentially ominous, right? Oh, are you a prisoner of your own hope? Are you a prisoner of your own hope, just unhappy and hoping for change? But what I'm arguing, obviously, is that you have to have the hope, because without the hope, nothing else can happen. That's part one. It's a predicate, right? The second part, excuse me. The second part, though, is what can either be used to help create the life that meets and surpasses our goals, or we can have a life that's just pain-ridden and desolate if we don't add the right ingredient on top of the hope, which is the action. It's both. You can't have one without the other. Now, some would say, well, you could have action without hope. Yeah, but it usually will not get you where you want to go. And that's the vision thing. And I spend so much time in our Magic Magician series and our HR Hero series and all the things we talk about that are more specifically focused on different types of business. Because if you just have a whole bunch of action, where are you going? You have to have the hope, because that's where you get the big idea. Like, where am I going with this? The action in and of itself is not going to get you anywhere that you really would want to go, because you don't have a plan. I tell this sometimes to audiences for speeches, but also sometimes to students. It's like this. If I said to you, hey, the action we're going to take is we're going to get in the car and drive. And you were like, cool, great, let's get in the car and drive. And I said, let's do it. And we're getting in the car and we're driving, right? The question that you're going to ask me at some point, sooner hopefully rather than later, but at some point you're going to ask me, we're in the car and we're driving, right? You're driving and I'm in the passenger seat, talking. I love riding in cars. I'm an excellent passenger. As a digression, don't always love driving. I'm a good driver, I think. I'm very safe. I tend to drive way too slow, people tell me, but I don't really love driving. I don't like traffic. But I love riding in cars. I'm an excellent passenger. So we're in the car, and at some point, hopefully, you're going to ask me, where are we going? Because we took action, right? We found the vehicle, we got into the vehicle, we had made fuel in the vehicle, we turned the vehicle on, and we're in it. We're moving, the vehicle is moving, we are driving. That is outstanding. But where are we going? Right? That's the hope thing. That's the vision. The action without a vision and a plan is just action, and it's just sort of wildly everywhere. So it becomes really difficult in those circumstances to meet and surpass your goals and to have a sort of a joyful life, because you're just you're doing a lot of action, but what are you going to get out of it? You don't even know. And we have other programs where I address this a little bit more, a lot more substantively, but And who's the one that's going to decide where you're going? I argue that you should be making a lot of these decisions, maybe in concert with other people, right? Family, friends, business partners, employees, employers, etc. But you need to have some very substantial input. So we need both. I need the hope, which is what could happen, right? What I want to happen be true. And then I have to have the action, and I have to have these balanced. If I just have action wildly without any kind of hope, it's very difficult to have that joyful art of business. If I have just hope without any action, it's very difficult. Now, people will say to me, well, there are people, I knew somebody, all they did was sit around and hope. They were just hoping, boom, they won the lottery, or they married a wealthy person, and their whole life changed, or somebody died they didn't even know about, and they inherited money. Now, most of these are economic ideas. We've always separated whether or not somebody wins a lottery or marries a wealthy person or inherits a lot of money doesn't necessarily correlate to whether or not they're happy. You can be unhappy and hope for change and be incredibly wealthy. Many people are, which is one of the reasons I talked about at the beginning of the show, why we do this series and why it's one of the fundamental principles of our programs, because there's so much of it in the world. What was the point of the financial resources if they're not bringing any potential opportunity? Well, because a lot of people, whether they're extremely wealthy or impoverished economically, are prisoners of their own hope. Wealthy people get trapped often in family dynamics that can be incredibly self-destructive. And the issue is, and the purpose of this show was again, as I mentioned at the beginning, to be a vivid description of what people do to themselves. And as I was sharing as a volunteer, it's hard. In some ways, it's even harder than when someone's part of your commercial business, because you want people. Most of us do. Everyone who's part of our community does. We want the best for people. And when people are in pain and people are in distress, we want to do something to help. And it's incredibly hard to watch someone refuse to save themselves, and even worse than that, put themselves in a situation where they're imprisoned in misery. And then they say stuff, well, I'm gonna hope they'll change. I'm gonna hope he'll change. I'm gonna hope she changes. I'm just going to hope for the best. Again, that's fine as part of the ingredients with the action that's going to get us potentially the best place we can be. Now, in reality, and many times in life, all of our choices are bad. Because life, sometimes the circumstances just aren't great. But you could have a choice that's the least awful of awful choices. And that could potentially open up the path for a future of completely different opportunities. But if you just stay where you are and all you do is hope, you've imprisoned yourself to stay right there. Just sit and marinate in that pain and isolation and loneliness and fear. Why? So as we come to the close of the show, I really hope that if this was something that was thought-provoking for either you or someone that you know, that you take what we discussed and add action to your hope and do what you can, understanding that everyone to a certain degree is, and this is what's so challenging in life, people are the drivers of their own chariots. Right? So if it's someone that is a friend or a loved one and you go to and say, there's an issue or there's something I'm worried about and I care and how can I help and let's get some action, or what can we do what kind of action would you be comfortable with? You can do a lot. And often you don't realize, because you'll make an offer and you'll try to be there for someone and they don't immediately seem like they even noticed it, or maybe even they're angry and hostile to what you offered. But sometimes you'll be surprised that it did mean something to them. And maybe the people never change and they just stay prisoner of their own hope. But even in that prison, it can be a little tiny, ray of sunlight that you did care and you do care and you are there. And sometimes people take a while to get ready to add the action. And sometimes we talked about a little while ago, you can be the person who was that quote inspiration for them. You believed in them when they didn't believe in themselves. It's a cliche, but there's something to that. There's a lot to that. So let's try to end on a more optimistic note. Yes, many horrific, horrible things happen. Some people go through their entire lives and nothing really horrific ever happens to them. It's just, hey. Some people go through their lives and it just seems like it's horrific thing after horrific thing, right? You just, wow. But no matter where you are, no matter what your experience has been at this moment, you're part of our program. You're with me here now. You've made choices to allow that to happen, and I appreciate that, and I'm proud of the good choices, and I'm proud of the negative choices because we're learning. And you have the potential in this moment to think about and to take action for yourself and again in other people's lives in ways that are healthy for you. We don't want to begin. We have other programs where people take on too much. You try to carry your pain and then carry other people, and that's not healthy because remember, they're driving their own vehicle, their own chariot, their own path, and they do have choices. And unleash yourself and try to be part of unleashing other people from some silly imaginary. That's the thing that's so sad about it. It's imaginary. The prison's imaginary. It's not even real, right? All you have to do is it's not even like a physical thing or an electronic fence or any kind of shocker or any type of it's literally imaginary and it's free. All you have to do is just add the action. And again, one of the things I do want to mention as we close is sometimes people say to me, oh, it seems like it's not that big of a deal, changing your nutrition or changing your, filling out some document or, you know, getting a class for a skill or credential or applying for some program or getting a job or whatever. But it seems overwhelming to somebody who just is out of resources emotionally, mentally, maybe financially. And so what you want to do is put it in little tiny pieces. So sometimes what I'll say to people is if we're talking about filling out paperwork for like a legal issue, I'll say, okay, and here's the deal. It's volunteer, so I'm prohibited. They're not my client. I can't fill the paperwork out for them. Now, there are other resources sometimes that will help them fill the paperwork out. If they qualify in some parts of the U.S., then there'll be lawyers who for free will be their actual lawyer on their case and will be able to fill the paperwork out and represent them. But those programs aren't so widely available that everybody who wants and thinks they need a lawyer is going to qualify for that service. And what I do in the volunteer work I'm referring to is I'm there to give people short little time periods of advice, but I'm not their actual lawyer of record, so I'm not able to fill the paperwork out. The people who work at the courthouses aren't able to fill the paperwork out because that would be practicing law, and they're not allowed to do that because they could create all kinds of horrible, bad outcomes without knowing exactly what's going on and being trained lawyers. So when I'll say to people sometimes if they choose to fill the paperwork out, but they say they're overwhelmed, I'll say take it and if it's 5 pieces of paper, take 1 piece of paper and work on that for a week. You don't have to fill it all out in one setting. That's I think what overwhelms people. Take whatever the task is and put it in little teeny tiny pieces. And psychologically, often, not always, but often, even if it's a little piece, and you're like, oh, I fill out three parts of, a 20-part piece of paper. Well, usually when you finish the 3 parts, you usually feel a little bit better. I'm on my way, right? And those little successes usually will help continue to fuel future action. It usually becomes a snowball effect of good things leading to more good things. And that's what we're trying to do. So we're not going to be prisoners of our own hope because that's an imaginary prison that people build. We understand we do need hope. We have to have it, but we have to have it and action. And that's the recipe. And then we constantly, you and I and everybody, we're constantly trying to balance the hope and the action to kind of get the correct recipe to help us meet and surpass our goals and then sustain, feeling like, hey, I'm not blissfully happy every second of every day, but in general, I'm content. I like my life, right? I feel good about me in general. I feel good about what I'm doing in general. And I'm going to try to make each day the best experience it can be. That's all we're hoping for and planning for. And the action of being part of the program today, you being here, is is part of the steps that you need to take to make sure that you are not now and never in the future are going to be in any kind of, one of these prisons. And I appreciate that more than you'll probably ever know. So thank you. Again, I encourage you to come to CourtneyAnderson.com and join into the program and take part in all the things that we're doing and have an outstanding rest of today. Thank you.